Well, good morning if you're in the western part of the country. And if you're in the East Coast time, it is good afternoon because we are sitting at 12 noon high at our new time that we're going to be broadcasting every Friday and coming to you here with another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And this week, just like every week, what we're bringing you, hopefully, is a tactic, a process, something that you can use in your business to move to the next level. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a tried and proven method. We know this works for the people that will apply themselves to it and do it, even though some people may not believe in it. And we're even going to deal with that today. So, Cheryl, you want to tell everybody what we're going to talk about today on this episode?
We are actually going to talk about SWOT meetings. We'll explain more about what that is after the next promo, but it is definitely a help for your company. It helps reel everything in, and it also gives the employee their chance and time to speak and help work on the business.
You got it. So, Brandy, what's your thought process today as we go into our discussion of the SWOT meeting?
Every company needs one. They need one at least once a year, and they need it done by an outside facilitator.
That's correct. So I also want to make sure you understand how this is spelled, which is SWOT, because a lot of times somebody thinks it's spelled SWAT, like we're swatting something, and we're not. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to go to our intro music. Stick around with us. We'll be right back. And today we're going to dig deep into something that can radically change where you're going to. So today's subject matter is the SWOT meeting. And SWOT is spelled SWOT. And what it stands for is the S stands for the strengths of your company. The W stands for the weaknesses within your company. The O stands for the opportunities that exist out there. And the T stands for threats to your company. Now, under the CBC process, we actually add a fifth letter to our process, which is the F, which stands for the fears. And this means the fears of your workforce. And we're going to talk about the benefits today of doing this and how it can move you radically forward. So listen, because Brandy just said in our intro, two critical things. Number one, it should be done on an annual basis, and we're going to explain why. And it also should be done by an outside facilitator, which we are trained to do, we are experienced to do, and we do this quite often. In fact, I presented and facilitated two of these in the past week for two different clients in one area of the country. So, Randy, I'm going to go to you first. What's the first things you would put in this discussion about how the SWOT might just be your answer to move you to your business dreams?
Well, we can't assess ourselves, right? It's like if I wanted to assess myself, I'm going to either tell myself that I'm too good or too bad. And it's the same way with our companies. We need somebody to come in and poll our staff and go over our challenges, go over our fears to see where we're at as a company. And we can't do that ourselves. If I asked my employees, what do you think the company's weaknesses are? They're probably going to give me a line of BS because they're afraid to tell me what they are. But if you come in, Jerry, and ask them, they're going to be truthful and honest with you. So that's why the outside facilitator is so important. And why we have to do it annually. Most companies, at least that we work with, you have at least a tiny turnover of staff every year. So we want to make sure that we're keeping it updated and involving the new staff as well, because as we add new staff or take away staff, our culture changes, which then changes what we identify on the SWOT.
Dead on the money. Cheryl, what's your beginning thoughts on the SWOT, the benefits, and how it's done? What's your beginning words would be in this?
Well, to me, the benefits is people can see it because we list it. It's right in front of them. It's not like I kind of thought I possibly could remember this. It's all listed out. So for the people that are visual, it gives them the visual. A lot of times our comments that we make within our company are only spoken. So the visual person does not retain them. And so we have taken this to the step of making it where it touches all of the different learning methods. And also, year after year, you reevaluate, how far did I go this year?
Yeah. Now, so to start it off with, Brandy said one of the things in her recommendations, it needs to be an outside facilitator. And that's exactly right. Not only that, it's got to be a person that's been trained and experienced in doing this. This is not something, I'll be honest with you, for a rookie to do, because it can really cause problems unless it's properly administrated. Now, the first is the beginning of it. And at the beginning, so you're aware, the employers, the management team become bystanders in this meeting. They are not in this meeting, and actually they're recognized last, because what we want to do is we want to get the feelings of the workforce out in the open. What are they seeing? Because here's the really true story, and I want you to understand this. Your team members know weaknesses that you do not know. And it comes out every single meeting that we are bringing things to the forefront that the employer honestly didn't know. So it's vastly important to begin the SWOT meeting. We always set the stage and we tell the participants there is nothing that cannot be brought up. This can be very direct. But I also want everyone to remember, no one's going to get their feelings hurt today. No one's going to really tear people apart. This is supposed to be an exercise as a team, and it is a team building exercise also. So make you aware of that. So that's what goes on at the start. Now, both Cheryl and Brandy have participated with me in SWATs. They have done it both from live and also from observation from a remote standpoint, that they're actually watching the SWAT. I set it up as a Zoom meeting, so I may be there alone, but they're sitting in the background and they can observe this. It's a little bit different than being able to be in the site. And to be honest with you, doing a SWAT, I've done some that were virtually during the COVID issues, but to be honest with you, I will not do a virtual SWAT if we can get in there, because it's just not as effective and it's not as controllable. And yes, things can get out of hand. So Brandy, what would you add into my words about how you begin this process?
I think just you kind of touched on it a tiny bit, but just at the very start, letting everybody know that it's a safe space, that they're going to give constructive feedback and constructive criticism, but it is safe for them to tell you their open and honest opinions. They don't need to hold back on those.
Correct. Cheryl, what about yours about the importance of setting the stage at the beginning of this meeting?
Well, I like the beginning stage not to be in the office complex, because you need to be in an outside location where the phones that work in the business are not there, where traffic's not there. You need to be totally away from the business so you can only put your mind on the problems, not on the daily ins and outs. And I say problems, it's not just the problems, it's also the huge pros that happen. I think we find out as many pros as we do cons in the SWAT meetings. And that's how I like to stage it in the beginning.
Correct. So as Cheryl just shared, SWAT meetings are always done off-site. We don't do them in the business location. We don't do it in their conference room. We require the client to find a location, a meeting facility. Now, this could be in a restaurant, if it's a private room, hotel meeting rooms are a common location. We also have private clubs that we hold them in, such as I recently did one in the yacht club in that area, of which the owner was a member of. So we go places where we can have privacy, but we're not distraction. Now, we also bring in tools to use. One is we use a flip chart, and on the flip chart is a specific kind that has sticky pages like sticky notes. As we go through and we list the things, these flip chart sheets go up on the wall. What we also have is each person there has something to write on, because as we ask the questions, instead of them speaking them out loud, we have them write down what they see as these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then we go around the room and I recognize each person and we put those up on that flip chart sheet. And if another person has the same strength, we put a hash mark beside it as a 1. So we just keep adding. And then by this, we're able to determine what are the overriding things by having this done. Used to, I would have people speak it out loud. But what I found out was that wasn't as effective as it is when I asked the people to write it on a sheet of paper and then we list them. We also need someone, and I can't qualify for this part, that has good handwriting, because when they go up on the flip chart, you've got to be able to read it. We're also using markers of various colors, and this is highlighting different things and separating it as it goes through. Again, there are tools and processes that we use. Cheryl, what would you add about the tools and processes that we're using during the SWOT meeting?
Well, we've got everything there for them. There's no reason for anybody to walk out of the room. Phones are laid to the side. I don't want to use the word you don't allow somebody to do something, but you definitely highly recommend that everybody stays in the moment. We also bring lunch in if possible, so we can keep everybody in a close-knit conversation. And I hear just about as much at lunch as I do sitting in the SWAT.
Yeah. Brandy, what about you? Anything you would add about the process?
Well, you talked about how we as the facilitators want to be on site. In larger companies, it's not always feasible to get everybody together there on site as the employees. And so we have done it where we've had employees remote in from vacation, remote in because they called in sick that day. And I think that's important to make sure that everybody's included on the employee side, whether that is remote or in person.
Correct. Now, what we're also doing is, remember, the management team members become attendees. They are not running the meeting. The outside facilitator, they run the meeting. So what the management is doing is listening, and they're also instruct them that they need to read the body language of the people. What are the reactions? Who is participating? Who seems to be antagonistic? Who seems to realm into it? It is not entirely uncommon that at the end of a SWOT meeting, I may give recommendations for termination of certain people, because we see some people that cannot deal with what's being, with the changes of the company. And so going through each step, what we're doing is, to start with, we're asking what each attendee sees as the strengths of the company. And be honest with you, it's wide ranging when we see these things listed. But once we list the strengths, my question is, what is unique about you? What sets you apart in the market area? It's like if I was doing a SWOT at Brandy's location, and my question would be, okay, those are all great strengths, but tell me, what is the strengths that you bring to the table that are unique in Kansas City? What is you have? Because, hey, when you tell me you're honest, you tell me you're ethical, you're telling me everything that every company is got. But what we're trying to concentrate on is what makes you unique and what are your big strengths. Now, also, as we go further, we're going to be talking further on this, but you can have a strength that is also a weakness. Okay, give you an example. You could be using the best software in the industry. You could have picked out, and we'll just use an example. You decide that ServiceTitan is your choice, and they have ServiceTitan. That's a strength, but it also becomes a weakness, because often the people are not using that software with all the bells and whistles that it has. In fact, I was going through that this morning with a client about how they've got to develop the KPIs and how you get the reports coming back to you, where the software can automatically generate those reports where you don't have to start punching buttons, because you don't have time to do those buttons or you forget to do those buttons. So what you need is, you need these reports automatically generated. So we're going through the strengths. And as we do this, like I said, well, somebody says again, and they agree, okay, we'll just say leadership. They say leadership's a strength. So what we're doing, we're amassing these of how many people see this. So some people see some strengths, others don't see those strengths. They see something that other people don't see. And that's the big thing about this. I want you to understand. Your people know things about your company that they may not share with you. In fact, one of the things I asked the company on their first swap, after being here and seeing what you've listed, I got to ask the question, why did you pay me to do an analysis? Because all your people knew all the problems. I didn't bring out anything new. Your people knew it already. So think about this, because you're doing a very deep dive into the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So Cheryl, would you add anything to where I'm at in the strengths?
The main thing with strengths, they're proud. You see it coming out. They're not. That's why I'm glad that it starts with the S, because they come out in a proud mode. We're good at this. This happens to our company. And it always amazes me how, as one person is giving theirs and then it moves to the next, the heads start bobbing like, yeah, I didn't think of that. So I like the way it comes out. It starts as a proud moment.
That's it. So Brandy, what's your thoughts as we listed these strengths in this meeting? And as you know, this list can get pretty long. We may be taking up, these are pretty big flip chart sheets, and we may be through 3 flip chart sheets, and we've got 20, 30 strengths on the sheet and coming up with these things. So what do you see out there?
Well, I just want to make a differentiation too, real quickly about that. What I would say on strengths is, remember that these are internal, because we're going to talk about external later. So these are internal to the company.
Correct. And that's one of the things that you'd be aware of. When we talk strengths and weaknesses, these are the internal things. These are the things that you can control. Now, when we get to opportunities and threats, those are exterior issues. And those are the things that you cannot control, but you better be aware of what's out there so you can prepare your defense. It's like right now, if you're not preparing for recession and inflation, you better get on this ball game, because it's happening. As we're recording this, the stock market just dropped 800 points this morning. So when you look at it, interest rates are rising. So what are you doing to put together your defense against this? But next we go into the weaknesses. So again, we asked everybody to write it down on their sheet of paper, and we give them some time. And usually at this point, I take a break, because I have a belief that after people sit in a chair for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, it cuts the blood off to the brain, and now the thinking starts dropping. So we got to get up, and we do take breaks about every hour to hour and 15 minutes. Now, these are short, concise breaks. We'll take a 10-minute break. And I tell everybody, I expect you to be back in your seat in 10 minutes, and we'll start off again to keep this on time today. But it's amazing, because now we're listing these weaknesses, and now we come up. And what's the interesting thing, when we watch these hash marks coming up beside, and I'll give you one, a leading thing we find is communication. And here comes the check mark: communication, communication, communication. And if we went through the history of all our swap meetings, that one issue comes to the forefront in a vast majority. Not all, but in many it does. And again, this week, in one of the ones I conducted, where was it? Communication. Another one was waste. So as you come up, now also keep in mind, I am also participating, because if I work with this company, because of what I'm seeing in the weaknesses. So Brandy, what does the weakness list expose to you?
I mean, just like you said, definitely there are areas where they need improvement. It can also sometimes bring out some resentments. So you have to be careful there again to keep it constructive.
Yeah. So we've gone through the strengths. We've gone through the weaknesses. Cheryl, what else did you have to add? Did you get yours in, or did I skip over you?
Get me, but that's fine. No, I'm going to piggyback off Brandy's comment earlier that this one is also internal. It is not external. These are weaknesses that can be fixed, that can be massaged into becoming a strength one day. And so we need to get those out. But again, this part of it can become confrontational. So if you've got your management running this, then they're going to absorb it as a confrontation. If we're standing in front of it, it's a problem. So you just reel it back in, and everybody follows the lead. But yes, to me, this is the hardest part on the company by far.
It is. So now we're going to move into the opportunities. And opportunities and threats, those are exterior issues. And one of the things that often happens, we're going to follow the same process. People are going to write down what they see their opportunities are out there. And as you're going through this, one of the things I explain is, right now, looking at today, we can't add additional products. We can't add additional services because quite simply, you're backlogged. You don't have the capacity. It's just like, Brandy, if somebody came up and said, hey, we need to go in the HVAC business here at Blues Brothers. Well, guess what? Have you got the capacity to do that at this point? No. And you're shaking your head right now. And that's what you got to be careful of, is the owner is going to hear things and they can't physically shake their head in this. And I have to school them before we go into this. You're going to hear some crazy ideas. And the whole thing is to get them involved. So we're going through the opportunities because the day may come, and I'll give you an example. Brandy, does natural gas, is that a big part of Blues Brothers business in Kansas City?
Yes.
Okay, so now all of a sudden, this Kansas and the Missouri state legislatures, which you work in 2 states, come up with a regulation that we are not going to put natural gas into any new structures. Is that going to affect your business?
Absolutely. You got to find a way to pivot at that point.
You got to find a way to pivot. Is it electrification? What's out there? And you got to be ready to pivot. So what we're doing is we're taking this list of opportunities and we're storing it for when this happens. Instead of having to have a meeting now and say, okay, things have gone haywire and we've got to find new products, new services to keep going. You've already got this plan laid out. So the opportunities side are here. Now I'm going to keep going into the threat side now because the threats are also external. And these are the threats from outside atmosphere. What are the things on the horizon, such as government regulations, inflation, recession, all the things that are going on, the supply chain issues. Cheryl, in your case, it could be freight damage in your business because freight damage affects that business. It could be any number of things, but they are exterior issues. They are threats to the survival of the business. Now, many times during the during the threat stage, somebody will bring up something that actually is not a threat because it's an interior issue and it's actually a weakness. So that's where the facilitator comes into play to make sure that we stay on track and emotions stay in check. And we add a little humor, and this is a long drawn out day. So we got to make sure people are comfortable. That's why we take the breaks. That's why we take the lunch breaks and everything else. So Cheryl, I'm going to go to you first. What do you see from the exterior examination of the threats and the weaknesses?
Well, I look at
threats and opportunities. I'm sorry.
As far as opportunities go, it gives the forward-thinking employee that you have, okay, if this were my company, I would add this. And so you also, at that point, I begin seeing who's forward-thinking and who is just piggybacking off the next guy or the next guy. Maybe they've heard of an opportunity down the street, such as duct cleaning or something that they don't do. Can they do it right now? Some of the things you actually can. Others you have to put on the back burner. The threats, that's where right before the fears come up. The threats are out there. There's nothing we can do. You have to acknowledge them and think about them. But the internet's a huge threat for us. That is a threat for many people. There's nothing you can do about it. So you just have to take it and figure out, okay, what processes am I going to put into play that will help balance off these particular threats because they're out there.
Okay. And Brandy, what's your thought about these external forces, the opportunities and the threats, and how we deal with that?
Well, I'm going to take a teeny bit of a different direction. And because so often you bring up SWATs to these companies and they kind of roll their eyes, or that sounds like a lot of work. And what they don't realize is that 90% of major corporations, and I made that figure up, do SWATs as well. And a lot of them you can find on the internet. And so when I teach my CSR classes, we don't do a SWAT, but I talk about what a SWAT is. And I show them Chipotle SWAT because I feel like lots of people like Chipotle. I don't, but it seems like lots of people do. So I will show them that. And if you can, let's see, can I share my screen? Yes, I just want to show you this just so people have a better idea. Maybe it's not going to let me. I don't think it's going to let me on StreamYard.
I think she just took herself right out of the picture, Cheryl.
That was do we call that interior or exterior?
Okay. Okay, so we have a weakness. We got to get Brandy where she understands how to share a screen. So hopefully, there she's back. Okay, so Brandy, while you were out, we were just talking about a weakness we have, which is we've got to teach you how to share your screen here. So
StreamYard and I are not friends, and you know,
that.
I do not like StreamYard. I'm very used to Zoom, but that's okay. I'll learn. So okay. I'm just going to read it rather than share my screen. But so since you're on opportunities and threats, some of them that came up in Chipotle most recently were expansion into international markets, digital orders, upgrades due to intense competition, training and retaining top performing employees, and a drive-through option. And under threats, they had loss of customer trust due to foodborne illness. I think we all remember a couple of years back when they had actually shut down for training because I think it was E. coli, if I remember right. Legal proceedings against Chipotle, challenges attracting and retaining employees, supply chain problems. That's a huge one right now for all of us. Fine due to violation of child labor law, and growing competition. So those are some embarrassing things, and they put those out there for the public to see their threats.
Right. And what you just said a while ago, you said something about you don't like Chipotle, but at the same time, your husband loves Chipotle.
Oh, okay? And my son.
I know. If you go to lunch, if I go with Jeremy, I can just about bet he's going to want, hey, Chipotle work for you, and goes from there. But our buddy Frank Matola just made a great comment here. So glad I listened to your advice and started down this SWAT path and made it a regular part of Brandtastic, okay? And Frank's one of those guys that probably didn't agree with this at first, but as he looked, he did the research, he tried it, and he found out it's something they need to do. Now, so Brandy, anything else you want to add on that before we keep going?
Nope, I just really wanted to point out that it's a part of what most companies do.
Right. Just think about this. And I put this in the pre-broadcast promotion. If Sears Roebuck had done this, they would be the Amazon of today. Because what this tells you is what you got to reinvent in your company to move forward. And the history, one of the things that I did, so you'll know, this is a book. It's a pretty big book. And what it's called is The Business History of the United States. And what it does, it goes all the way back into the formation of the United States of America pre-Revolutionary War, and it shows the businesses that were at the top of the heap and how they have disappeared. And if you think about it, you see this in our own world. What happened to Circuit City? What happened to Kmart? What happened to Sears and all these other companies that basically we grew up in childhood? Montgomery Ward's, where in the world did they go? And Grant stores and all the others, they simply didn't reinvent themselves. But if we look at the other side of the coin, how about the Southern Pacific Railroad to become the telecommunications giant called Sprint today? If we look, that's what you got to do. You got to reinvent, and this is going to help you. Now, the next phase, and this is a custom part that we came out of the SWAT regular confines of the SWAT meeting, because I came to a determination that there was a missing ingredient. And the missing ingredient was the fears that the people in the room had. What are their interior fears? Now, I want to think for a minute And Brandy, you cannot sympathize with this because you've not lived through what I'm getting ready to challenge Cheryl with. Now, Cheryl, I'm not your first husband. And what that means is I'm the third husband you have. Hopefully, three strikes will win and we'll continue on. But at the same time, when you entered into a second and a third relationship with a new husband, did fears from a past relationship, did they make you fearful of the future at times?
Probably a little different from other people because I've got a drive of my own. I would say for other women, maybe more. But did I bring baggage across? Yes, I did. And that's meaning the fears. There was some things that went on in both previous marriages that you just had to face when you go into it. And that's the way the world is. Anything that happened in the past, you and I have lived through recessions. We've lived through a lot of other things that maybe Brandy hasn't come through. And I think probably our fear or our concern of what may be coming down the pike for us, we know it'll change and go back to the way it was, but we also know where the possibility of where it's going is. And so if we were in a SWOT, that would be one of our fears. Where are we going this time?
Right. And it's just like you just said things. So let's give a comparison between the two of you. Today, later today, you and I are going to a graduation for our grandchild. Now, Brandy, if I'm correct, you're going through a graduation for your son this year. Am I correct?
Correct.
So, more than likely, due to past life histories that we each have, and probably, Brandy, you look at this high school graduation possibly different than Cheryl and I look at it Lydia's later today because of past experiences and where are they going to go. In you, it's just all you know is the anticipation, and you're losing a child from your nest. And I understand that completely. In fact, I asked her earlier today, yesterday, if her daughter was going through any emotions because her daughter is graduating high school, and this is her youngest one versus Noah is your oldest of your children. But you bring this, I call it past life experiences, and Cheryl gave it the right word, which is actually baggage of bringing in. So we go through these fears, and these are some of the things that we find out. Many times you will have an employee that when you start talking growth will be very turned off by growth. And what I found out is every time this happens, there is usually a past life experiences of working in a job and the company decided to get bigger and then the company failed or had to lay people off because they were not properly running and managing to go through the change. So that was kind of what we've seen and why we ask, what are your fears? What are your fears related to the business? And I even use personal experiences in this. Like I talk about, one of the things is I'm deathly afraid of snakes. If a snake comes in here right now, it's me or the snake. Somebody's got to go. And I'm probably going out and I'm going to call somebody to come get this snake out of here. It just doesn't fit well. Now, how did I get that fear? Because my daddy was scared of snakes. And what have I done? I pass that fear along to my son because if there's a snake loose, we do know he will bring a gun inside the building with a concrete floor and concrete walls, and he's ready to shoot the snake, okay? And not even thinking of the potential backlash of a ricocheted bullet off this concrete floor, okay? We've seen this happen, okay? I was called one time to get to my office and somebody better come get this stick because your son's got his gun out inside the building. We're shaking your head. This is the things you go through as your children grow, Brandy. See what you got to look forward to. So, Cheryl, what would be your thoughts? Any additional thoughts on this baggage thing and how it affects where you're going?
Well, I will add a little humor here. The only person I have seen worse than you with snakes was my ex-husband. I think I have this clingy thing for snakes. I have no idea. But that's not one of my fears. And so, not if I see it first. But the thing about it is we all have fears. We all know what's great. We know what's not. The thing is, there's only a limited amount of these that we have any control, and that would be the first two, and the strengths and the weaknesses. The others, we have no control. We just have to adapt. And I think adaptation would be my word of the day, is adapt to what you can't change.
Yep. So Brandy, what about yours? What's your thought processes?
Gosh, right now all I'm thinking about is a rubber snake and what I'm going to do with it next time I see you. But on to another subject. Fears, I also want to just bring up too, though, that fears can be motivating. Fears aren't always this horrible, scary thing. Look at what happened during COVID. Grocery stores had fears that now people aren't going to come in and shop for their groceries. So what did they do? They started home delivery. So many great things came out of the fears that we had around COVID and forced people to innovate.
Yep, that's that on the money. And that's where you don't want to be. You want to be ahead of the ball game. And see, that's where this process. Now, Brandy, one of the things that you said in our introduction is this needs to be an annual event, and exactly right. And part of what I do is I have one-on-one coaching relationships with businesses across the country. And what that involves is I do, if you follow me much, you'll see me checking at airports a lot, because like every week I'm going somewhere or I'm driving. You see Cheryl shaking her head. Yeah, it seems like I just got home yesterday morning from an early morning flight from Milwaukee, but I'm heading somewhere about every week. And a lot of that is training, but it's also doing these SWOT meetings. So what we recommend is you do it once a year. And the reason we do it once a year is we are able to gauge where we were a year ago and then where we are today. And we're able to gauge the changes. Now, also what happens is this is actually a history of the company. So what we can do is show new employees. Brandy, it's like you and Jeremy's business. If we were to show your employees, part of that history will be, hey, let's take you down the street. Let me show you this building down the street that we used to operate out of. You remember that building?
Very well.
You remember that. So how well could you function Blues Brothers out of that building today?
Oh, we couldn't. There wasn't enough parking back then, and we've like tripled in size. We wouldn't be able to function.
Right. It's like I can well remember teaching you a certification class with an old television, and it's like, and it was such a nice training room, wasn't it? She froze.
Yep, I froze up. I'm back.
Right. But you know what I was talking about was your people, a lot of them don't realize where you were to get to where you are today. Okay. They don't realize that. I mean, when they go into a restroom, guess what? They got a heated restroom now. Down the street, your restroom was not real warm in the summertime, if my memory serves me correct.
In the winter, yeah. In the winter,
In the wintertime, it was quite miserable back there. So anyway, but you got to see what it's at. Like right now, you're in a really nice office. Your office down there was nothing like this. I can well remember Jeremy just had a kitchen table. You know, maybe he was kind of like Jeff Bezos back and using a door for his table or whatever, but it was. But this is what people have to know. So what they're doing is this becomes a history of the company. So we save the records for each of this. We store them digitally and we refer to them on futures, and we get to watch the company as it matures and as it grows. It becomes kind of a history. And what we see is the companies that follow this. Now, this is a big one, folks, and listen to me correctly. If you do this, and you don't do squat with this, if you have this meeting, and at the end of the meeting, leadership just rolls up those flip charts, throws them in the back of the car, maybe forgets about them for a couple years, stumbles across them, but takes no action. Brandy, what happens if we go through this process and the company takes no action to correct weaknesses?
Well, not only does nothing change, but the employees build up resentment because they gave of their time this day to go through this whole process and felt valued and felt like they were being heard and listened to, but then nothing changed.
That's exactly right. You're going to kill your morale. It's like I often say as a coach, One of the hardest things that I have to do when I find out that a company has had a previous consultant or coach come in there, and I find out, okay, what happened or whatever. And that is a challenge I have to face, because now they've done had another company working with them and nothing happened. It's kind of like I tell people this, and where you see people go to a SWAT meeting, to a mixed group meeting, to a convention, and every time they come back, they're just loaded with all this great stuff that we heard and all this stuff we're going to do. And 3 days later, ain't nothing happening. And what that does, guess what? Just take a baseball bat and eradicate the culture in your company. Just take it and knock it right out, because you are saying, hey, we're not going to do nothing. All this is we're just doing this and going through the motions. So, Cheryl, what's your thoughts on going through the motions?
Number one, you need to go through them. But the thing is, I'd like to add right now that I think this is so important for large companies, and older companies. But I also think it is extremely important for the younger companies that don't want to have to take the steps that a lot of us did. They can work it out in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So that is a process. This is a proven process. When you looked on it, just like Brandy said, look it up on the internet. Look up Southwest Airlines. Southwest is known for being the top in customer service. Now, I'm not a Southwest customer. Brandy is a Southwest customer, because where I live here in Charlotte, there ain't a lot of direct flights. We got American that goes about everywhere from here. And I'm not crazy about the Southwest cattle car where you line up in order and all this kind of stuff and those type of things like that. But it works for a lot of people because of the culture. So it's just like Chipotle. Chipotle works for a lot of people, Brandy. It doesn't work for you. And that's what we have to realize. By doing the SWOT, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to identify who your customer is and who your customer isn't. Now, an additional thing that we do during this is I make the participants list every competitor for their dollar. In other words, if there's another company that has a capability of taking $1 for their business, I want them listed up on the wall. Now, after we list them, I then ask the question, what do they provide that you do not? Okay, because we're dealing with internet retailers, we're dealing with Amazon, Woodland Direct, the list goes on of people that are competing for your dollar. That is right down to gasket for your wood stoves. That is everything that you sell. Somebody sells it on the internet. So what do they provide? You got to understand this. It's like right now, Brandy just got woken up by her daughter in the middle of the night 2 days ago. And we got to get Brandy a quiet room to sleep in because she's getting disturbed too much out there. But what was it? It was an Amazon delivery in the middle of the night, because now on Amazon, you can specify a delivery between 12 midnight and 4 a.m. Think about that. Now, what are they doing? It may sound crazy, but a lot of people, that's what they want. Just like they want grocery shopping in the middle of the night, different times. If you're not receptive to your customer's needs, if you can't identify who your customer is, and if you can't identify who your customer is not, how do you know how to guide their business? How do you know how to do that? You got to know these things to put forth the information that you're going to have to promote out. So, Cheryl, what's your closing words on SWOT meetings today?
My closing words to any company would be, if you're not doing this, give it some really deep thought. And I would say, if nothing else, at least try it 1 year. But if you try it that 1 year, make sure you make the changes that your people did. I think it will be a continuing thing, as Frank had put in earlier. He's so glad he did it. And I can't think of anyone at this point that was probably harder to convince than him.
Knowing Frank Matola, as my good friend Frank, if you're listening, I know you're still out there, but I can only imagine how hard that might have been for Frank. I mean, Brandy, you agree with Frank, that could have been a very hard experience for him to go through, but now Frank is seeing the benefits. Would you agree with that? And Frank, I'm not cutting you apart. That's your personality, and I just want to recognize you for taking this step.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Brandy, what would you add in to complete our discussion of the SWOT meeting process?
I would just take Nike's slogan, just do it.
That's it. So here's the whole thing. If you want to know more about SWOTs, reach out to us. We'll be glad to give you that answer. If you want someone to do a SWOT for you, any of the three people on this call have the training, have the experience. They can do this for you. You don't have to be a client. It's something we do provide as a service. It's got to fit into our schedules. So if you look at it, I can tell you there's three different personalities, three different points of view on this broadcast with you right now. You can bring in one of us. You can bring in two of us. You could conceivably bring in all three of us if you wish, if you want to go through the SWOT process. But if we're not your choice, that's fine. It's fine. But find someone to do this for your company that's going to be able to provide what you need. They need to be trained in it. They need to be experienced in it. And they should have some testimonials from people to tell you what it has done for them as far as that's concerned. But I think that if you will go into this process, if you look at this as managing your company, if you look at this as part of building your strategy, building your GPS to go to the future, believe me, your team members, your employees, they know so much about how you can move to the next level. And this is one of the key things. Brandy, do you agree your business has to change?
Absolutely. Always, every day. It's got to be ever evolving.
Right. So one time I asked a good friend of ours, a mentor coach, his name's Randy Pennington. And Randy, who is a change expert, how do you enact change? And he was really simple. He said, Jerry, if you're going to enact change in the company, the employees of the company must be involved in the change. In other words, you can't dictate this down. They're not going to follow it. They're going to have to buy into the process. So this is part of the CVC prescription for your employees to buy in. So if we can help you, you reach out to us. If it's not us, find a facilitator. There's a lot of people that can do this for you, but I think it will make a dedicated change in your life, your leadership, your management, and where your company is going to go. So with that, we'll see you next week. Again, remember our new time. It is 12 noon Eastern time on Fridays. We're transferring to that time as of this week. And we look forward to you joining us on a future episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And with that, we'll see you next time on the next episode. And we appreciate you joining us today.